The MBA application process is a long and worthwhile journey because you do a lot of introspection and you learn so much about yourself. But let me be real with you guys. A lot of the MBA application process is not fun. It can be stressful, especially if you don't know what you're doing. That's why today I'm going to be going over the 5 key sections of the MBA application and give you guys all really practical tips on how you can crush each part so you can get into the school of your dreams. First up, let's go into the academics, which includes your GPA and GMAT or GRE. For each of the sections throughout the video, I'm going to be going over what admissions teams are looking for with each section, and then I'll go into tips on each part. So starting off with academics, admissions teams are typically looking for 2 things. The first is whether or not you can handle the MBA academic course load, and you can learn more about what classes are like in this video right here. The second is honestly just for business schools to maintain clout, and that's because every single school releases class profiles every year, and they want to make sure that they have as high of a median or average GPA and GMAT or GRE. What this means is that generally speaking, you'll want your GPA to be above a 3.5 at least. So if you're still in undergrad, make sure to study hard just like your mama told you to do, because the higher the GPA, the better your chances will be. Now, if you're already out of school and you're the type of person who doesn't include their GPA on their resume when applying to jobs because the GPA is too low, don't worry, that's what the GMAT or GRE is for. We all know that some schools grade harder than others, some have grade inflation while others don't, and some majors are easier than others. So that's why the GMAT and GRE are great equalizers that schools use in order to judge candidates on a more even playing field. Generally speaking, the lower the GPA, the higher the GMAT or GRE score you want to get. And if you have a really good example, in the optional section of your application, you can explain why your GPA was low if there is a good reason, like taking care of a sick parent. One example from my end is when I was in my freshman year, I was really sick my first semester, and I wasn't able to make a final. So I passed a pass-no-pass class, and I was still able to get in school. In terms of the GMAT versus GRE, I don't think it really matters. Schools always say that they don't care. And so as long as you're able to get a high score in either of these tests, I would choose the one that you think you'll do better at. All schools have different standards for their academics, so what I would recommend is Googling the schools you're applying to and class profile, and some facts and figures will pop up, and you can find what GPA and GMAT or GRE score you should be targeting. Later on, I'll be making a separate video on my best tips for taking the GMAT, but if you're struggling to study for the GMAT like I used to at one point, one resource I highly recommend is today's sponsor for the video, Target Test Prep, also known as TTP, and it's a resource that was crucial for me in helping me getting a 750 on the GMAT. When I was studying for the test, I did a lot of research, and on Reddit and different forums like GMAT Club, what kept popping up was TTP. Checked it out myself, and what I ended up really liking about it is that it took a topic by topic approach to make sure that you're prepared for any question that pops up on the GMAT. Here's how it works. For both quant and verbal, TTP breaks down all of the individual topics that appear on the GMAT, and with them come lessons and practice tests ranging from easy, medium to hard that lets you hone your skills and master each topic. TTP is a one-stop shop that covers both quant and verbal sections of the GMAT, and it's the only company on GMAT Club with a triple-digit 5-star rating. You're also able to customize your study plan for whatever works best for you, and I credit TTP a lot for helping me get a 750 on the GMAT. If you want to check them out for 5 days for just $1, feel free to use my link down in the description below. All right, next let's go into what oftentimes people consider the hardest part of the application process, which are essays. For these, admissions teams are looking for 3 things. The first is to understand your story and what drives you. The second is why you need business school. And the third is to see whether or not you've done your research into the program and not just spraying and praying. Let me go into tips for how to address each one. First, in terms of sharing your story, what I personally found most helpful when I first started was just sitting down with a piece of paper and writing down all of the important moments or parts of my life that really impacted me in a huge way. To give you some examples, I wrote about how my parents used to work when I was in elementary school, which caused me to be a bit more independent. I also wrote down about how in 2008, my dad's business kind of flopped and it was a pretty tough time for us financially as a family. I also talked about my different work experiences at JP Morgan and also my fashion startup. So just anything from all the way back into your childhood to the present day, write down everything you can and then start piecing everything together. Next, for why you need business school, this really comes down to your career goals. So have a really good understanding of how business school is going to be able to help you in the short and long term. One of the best reasons for going into business school is if you're looking to pivot careers. So for example, maybe you work in tech right now in a business operational role, but you want to work in tech investment banking. Another reason that's commonly talked about is building stronger leadership skills and developing more MBA community. And if you're only focused on this, it probably means that you're sponsored by a management consulting company or a private equity firm that's paying for all your tuition and you just want a 2-year vacation. Next, going into whether or not you've done your research, schools want to see that you've tailored your application to their program, and each school will ask in one way or another about why you want to go to that school, and they want you to make them feel all nice and special. Now for this, I have 2 important tips for you. The first one might be a little obvious, but definitely reach out to any alumni or students that you currently know attending these schools and learn about what makes each program unique, because they will be able to provide you some really good insider info that you can use in your essays. Second, almost every single school has virtual informational sessions, and some might even have them in person, which you can sign up for. And these are usually pretty helpful, especially if you are a beginner and don't really know anything about the school. And sometimes they also give you contact information about people on the admissions teams, which you can reach out to if you don't know anybody attending the school right now. So a good way for you to kind of get your foot in the door. What's also really crucial is that you have a common line that goes through your past, present, and future. So past being what drives you, present being where you're at now, and future what your goals are with your MBA. All of that should make sense and it shouldn't be discombobulated. So for example, I talked about how I was closing down my fashion startup and wanted to pursue another business while I was at school. And then in the long run, combine my experiences from investment banking, entrepreneurship, and kind of being in the creative field to create a VC firm that invests in creatives and artists or creative businesses in the creative field. And so as you can kind of see with my kind of story, all of that kind of combines well together. You want to make sure that yours does as well. As a really quick plug, I'm also building out a how to get into MBA course and giving out 50% discounts for people who sign up early. Feel free to check it out using my Google form link down in the description below. All right, next up, let's go into your resume, aka your professional experiences. For your resume, admissions teams are really looking for the biggest and best brand names that they can brag about in their class profiles that they make, or they're looking for some kind of spectacular achievement like selling your startup or quick promotions or ranking at the top of your class. So anything like that should definitely be on your resume. In my opinion, I don't actually think that admissions teams really care about what you actually do at each of these jobs, because you can kind of put whatever you want to make yourself sound good. Plus, it's not like these admissions teams have worked in investment banking or management consulting or tech, accounting, etc., right? So if you use complex language about how you built, like, let's say a DCF model or an LBO, etc., they won't really understand what all that means. And they care more about the big brand names, about getting a student that worked from Goldman Sachs instead of like a no-name bank, right? And so that's why my real main tip for the resume is to just have it in the simplest language possible so that your grandma could understand it. Besides simplifying the language, another thing you can do is add a descriptor as to what your actual company did, especially if it's not a really well-known company. And another thing I did on my resume was bold the key parts of my resume that I wanted to really bring the admissions team's kind of reviewers' attention to. Besides that, all other resume tips pretty much apply, like having a lot of numbers to quantify your impact, having good formatting, no spelling errors, and simple things like that. I actually think the letter of rec is where the admissions team really gets a flavor and feel for how you work in a workplace setting. And so let's talk about that next. I have 3 tips for you. The first, which is the most important, which is to make sure to create a document for your recommendation writers that goes over all of the key achievements that you've had at work and what the important work streams that you worked on are. And no matter how much your recommendation writers love you, I promise you, no one loves you more than you love yourself, and no one will remember what you worked on better than you yourself. In this document, also provide the schools you're applying to, the deadlines for each, and the prompts. Just make things really, really easy for them so that they can write the best letter of recommendation for you as possible. The second tip I have for you is to make sure to give your writers some guidance about how it's super, super important for admissions teams to actually feel when they're reading the letter that they deeply cared about you in some way. It doesn't have to be an emotionally sappy letter, but you don't want the writer to just list out your accomplishments, because that's what your resume is for. The letter is really, a letter. It should have some kind of feeling, maybe even some vulnerability, or how they really, really struggled to let you go and they don't want you to go to business school, or maybe not necessarily in those words, but those kinds of feelings, because they cared about you so much as a team member or employee. That's what really is most important in the letter of recommendation. The third tip I have for you is more of an answer to a common question amongst candidates, which is, should I have a more senior manager write a letter or a more lower level one that's able to write a better letter because you worked on them more closely? And the answer is almost always the latter. If you think about it from an admissions team's perspective, no matter how senior your senior manager is to you, they get letters from all types of managers across the world, right? And so no matter how senior that person is, it's not really going to impress them that much. What's really important is the quality of the letter. The last section is the actual application itself, which I think is often overlooked. A really big mistake that some candidates make is just getting the essay prompts for each school, writing them up over a few months, and thinking that their job is mostly done. There are 3 things you need to know. The first of which is a more practical tip, which is to make sure that as soon as you can, just create accounts for all the schools you're applying to and go through the different parts of the application to understand what they're going to be asking you to fill out, because it takes a lot longer than you might think. You'll find that there's a lot of background information that they'll ask you, with things like what was your latest salary, when did you leave, why did you choose to leave your latest job, etc., things like that. And then also small questions like what are your short-term and long-term goals, and you need to answer all these questions very thoughtfully. This leads to my second tip, which is to maximize every single small question that they ask. For example, instead of saying something like, my goal short term is to work on a startup and in the long run start my own venture capital fund, I wrote something like, upon graduation, my goal is to build a platform connecting creatives with consumer opportunities, and in the long run combine my experiences in finance, consumer, and entrepreneurial experience to start a VC firm focused in the creative space. The third tip I have for you is to utilize the optional section, which is a part of almost all MBA applications, in order to address any of the weaknesses of your overall application. Alright, so that concludes my tips for the MBA application. Good luck to everyone who's applying right now. And if you want to actually buy the applications that got me into Wharton and Columbia, I'm selling those at rareliquidcareers.com. Also wanted to give you guys a friendly reminder about target test prep if you're studying for the GMAT. I'll leave links to all of this down in my description below. With that said, thank you all so much for watching. In the next screen, you'll see a video about what MBA classes are actually like if you want to check that out. Hope to catch you in the next video. Thanks so much and peace out.